Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, Peak Performance Coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Well, welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley, and we have an amazing guest on today that I've known for several years. But before we get to our guest, I do want to share this week's analytics. Currently, we are being subscribed to and followed on 6 continents, 43 countries, all 50 U.S. states, and 1,114 cities across this globe of ours. So I want to thank all of you out there, all of our amazing guests, and all of you Bamboo Pack subscribers for listening, for rating, reviewing, for sharing us with your loved ones. It's really helping us to get an amazing message out to the world, and we do that through our guests. So thank you all very much. I do want to share one beautiful heart letter we got. We did a podcast on Sunday that was released on the 9th, and it was with my son Dawson. And this podcast really took off within a few minutes, and we've just received dozens and dozens of heart letters through email, through text, through Facebook message, through the website. And this one came through yesterday, and this Bamboo Pack member said, I loved this. Thanks to Dawson for sharing his story. I listened to every word of it. I want my son to listen to this one. He grew up without a dad around most of the time, but that's nothing compared to utter abandonment of a mother. But it might put things into perspective for my son. So for you who had the courage to reach out to me yesterday and share that heart letter, I thank you. All right, let us get started. I want to read the bio of a lady I have known for I'm going to say 7, 8, 9 years so far. We have Lisa McBride on today. Lisa is a single mother of 2 amazing girls, a working professional, and a certified independent health coach. She has always had the heart for service, community, and assisting others to win. 10 years ago, she was introduced to an amazing community and health program that not only changed her physically, but in her energy, motivation, and an awakening to a new, healthier habits and a healthier relationship with her body, her mind, her spirit, and her food. She has learned to break through old unhealthy habits and start new healthier ones. She is passionate about whole body health and making changes from the inside out. She shares her story because she gets it. She's been through it. She's faltered at things, but she believes anyone who is willing to try, truly ready and willing to work toward their goals, can change their lives. I love it. That's why I reached out, Lisa. Lisa McBride, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Well, thank you, Brian, so much for asking me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, it's an honor to have you.
I have to admit, though, when you first reached out, I've listened to your podcast, and I've heard the credentials of people, and I'm like, really? Me? Oh. A lot of your people have written books or made films, and I'm like, wow. But I had to kind of work through that, coach myself through that, actually, and just know that we are, we're all more alike than we are different. And I feel like I'm probably relatable to a lot of people listening to your show, and we've had a lot of life and a heart for others and just want to work a little bit each day at improving. Thank you again for asking me.
I can honestly tell you, Lisa, that the vast majority of my guests say the same thing. They normally say it before they get on the air or after we're off on the air, but you said it right on there, so there's some kudos to you for saying. But I've been able to follow it. And Lisa, I know I've known you for a few years. I believe I coached you at one point years ago.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how. I knew we connected professionally several years ago, but I thought I think I coached Lisa back in the day. And I really have loved the transformation you have made physically, spiritually, intellectually and emotionally over the past several. I've followed you on Facebook, and I've seen the people you've worked with and the transformations they made, and that's why I reached out. So your credentials are just as solid as anybody else we've ever had on here. So, well, let's get started, Lisa. I know, somewhat about you, but I still have a lot to learn. But can you share with the Bamboo Pack audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your childhood, whatever you'd like to share?
Absolutely. Which is surprising to most. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I was born in Canada. I am the middle child of two brothers. There's actually 18 years between my oldest brother and my little brother, and I'm smack in the middle. So I have an older brother who's 8 years, and then there's one who's 10 years younger than me. And actually thinking back to it, I think it's actually helped me be a little gritty and a little resilient because I had to be tough, having two brothers. And I also think having a brother that much younger than me was probably when I realized I really wanted to be a mom. I loved having a little brother. I loved caring for him and babysitting. And so I knew I wanted to be a mom at a really young age. So we moved from Canada to Seattle when I was about 2. And actually, it's probably my first memory. I don't have a great memory, let's just say that. But one of those first, moments in life that I do remember, I had heart surgery when I was 4 at Seattle Children's Hospital. And I'm going to age myself or date myself a little bit, but I know my parents had like a drawing of the actual heart surgery. So it wasn't digital, negatives now. But it really was probably also my first memory of the importance of prayer and community and people rallying around you. My parents hadn't lived in that area very long, but they had established a really good community in that couple of years. I'd say I was about 6 when we moved then down to a smaller town just south of Portland, Oregon, called Lake Oswego. And I was very fortunate to grow up in a safe area with great schools. I grew up riding horses, grew up in 4-H. I remember my folks would often drop me off at the barn and pick me up, when it was dark. And so, I was fortunate to really experience a lot of that kind of farm life, as well. And I also think there was a lot of experience learned in that season of life. I was tiny, and when you're working with an 1,100-pound animal, you learn to ask, not demand. You learn to work well with others, and so that was a great season in my life. And I can remember being 16. I think my parents kind of said, "Do you want a horse or a car?" And I chose the horse, and I was so it was kind of a great time. My parents, we bought this. I grew up in a pretty affluent area, but you have friends that have all the fancy toys, and we were a little bit more moderate, but I was very fortunate and very blessed to have the things that I had. I was very grateful for it at that time, but I picked the baby horse, and again, I worked really hard. I would think it was the first time I realized, we don't have instant gratification. It's about working really hard. It is about that grit and resiliency, and we had a lot of, like I said, a great time and a great memory training this baby horse. And then I think it was about that same time in life, my parents bought me an 88 Volkswagen Fox because I think they were tired of driving me back and forth to and from, with parenting, it's thick, it's busy, and so I remember learning, how to change a tire and how to change my older brother, how they change the brake pads on a car. And so again, hands-on, working through life skills was great at that age. So yeah, and I've kind of come full circle. I've now raising my oldest daughter, and possibly looking like my youngest will graduate from the same school I did. So we've kind of circled back, come full circle, and now I'm a single mama, and I'm living in the same town where I grew up and went to school. So I want to give them that same opportunity that I had. So
it's a bit of a Hallmark movie.
Yeah,
it's
there's bumps along the way, but there's definitely, I would say that season in life, it was pretty good. As a teenager, I lived, my parents, we had our moments, but for the most part, I learned a lot in that, about myself in that season. I think in growing up, I was very fortunate to have a pretty smooth childhood. And I know that's not the same for all. So.
Right. Now you said earlier, a few moments ago, that you were tiny, but you were dealing with these large animals, horses and whatnot. You said something like you learned to ask, not demand. Is that what you said?
Yes, I think, because I think you just learn to just, when you're working with a large animal like that, I think I learned the art of just asking and working with something. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to work around horses, but they're pretty magnificent, but they're pretty large, right? And so it was a great balance of learning how to work with something that's, you can't make them do anything they don't want to do. Let's put it that way. So they have to want to do it for you. So it was a great thing to learn that, work with them, and that kind of asking them and being aware of temperament, my mood, their mood. And it was great.
A lot like teenagers.
Yes, I think I learned a lot that I'm kind of like unpacking now when I'm going through teenagers again.
Yeah, they're not as big as a 1,500-pound horse, but they're just as difficult and stubborn at times, that's for sure.
Yes.
Well, growing up, Lisa, what was your greatest inspiration?
I would say I've had a lot of people in my life that I've looked up to, or, books that I've read, things like that. But I would have to go back to my parents. They actually immigrated from England to Canada in the 70s. I love that adventurous spirit that they were willing to uproot and do, kind of go out on a dream, and they've been married for 50 years, which I feel like, I'm now single. So I'm like, that's a feat in itself. It's not easy. But I think a lot of my love for nature came from them. We grew up sailing in the San Juan Islands a lot. And so, I was thinking back to that's where a lot of my love of being on the water has come from. Now I love paddleboarding. And I'd say, right now, being in the health industry and having a passion for health, my dad actually lost both of his parents pretty early to health-related issues that were going on. And so he was very intentional about taking really good care of himself. He was always hiking or cycling or rowing or doing something. And I think, that was, definitely made a difference on how, I now take radical responsibility for, what I have control over. That was instilled in me pretty young. We'd go on bike rides together, as a young child. So that was always important. They also modeled a really strong faith, which in the course of my life and different seasons has been stronger and, but it's strong again. But I think they had always modeled that. So I look up to how they've handled tough situations. They always put our family first too. And I think, when it's just the five of us, like I said, I had my brothers and it was just the two of us. We didn't have big family gatherings or, it wasn't until I was, married. I'm like, Christmas is a big thing. We used to sit around in our sweatpants, and, on Christmas and Thanksgiving. But then we also learned, I think, that you can actually have family or friends become family. We would remember adopting, grandmas and grandpas and cousins, and we would call them family. So I think it was great for me to kind of just, that inclusiveness of, was really modeled from my parents as well. They were my biggest supporters and my prayer warriors. And to this day, I still love spending time with them. And I think watching my dad had a stroke last February, and just even as an adult, watching them go through and navigating these tough things, they just, that's why they're my inspiration. They model it so well. And it's not that it's easy, but they just, like I said, their priorities and what they're intentional about are spot on.
Well, I've always been so impressed because you so often on Facebook have pictures of your family, your parents and you and your daughters on there included. So I want to go back to something you said at the beginning of the episode here. You said when I asked you to become a guest on here, you were looking at the credentials of my previous guests, and you were like, okay, well, I just want to share. Do you realize how many pearls of wisdom you've dropped in the first 15 minutes?
Oh,
so in case you haven't, let me recap. So I want the Bamboo Pack members out there. If you didn't catch these, please write these down. Or if you're driving, running, hiking on a treadmill, somewhere where you can't write. When you get home, these are good messages here. So some of the things so far that I really liked, and one thing she said at the beginning was, she said, we're all a lot more alike than we are different. And I think that's one of the most important messages right now, especially in this country we live in, that we can all capture. We all have, there's a lot of differences out there. There are. But overall, when you break us down to the core primal level, we are so much more alike than we are different. And I really like this fact that she said when she was working with these horses as a young girl, and she was in 4-H and had horses and actually chose a horse over a car, I've never heard of that, which is amazing. She was tiny, but she learned that you get much more by asking than you do by demanding. And I think that's so powerful. I've always been a very bossy person, and I know that. And I'm a very impatient person at times. But one thing I've learned over the course of my life, this is probably more in the past 5 years, is, you lead much better with a carrot than you do a stick. And I think that's very powerful. I loved what you said, though. You take radical responsibility for the things you have control over. That's one of the most powerful statements I've heard in a long time. Radical responsibility for the things you have control over. So Bamboo Pack audience out there, think about the things right now. I know you're on here. Many of you are on here because you're struggling with something. Something can be something potentially very major in your life. And even if you're not right now, we all have these small little things we're working on. We have worries, concerns, insecurities, our foibles, our frailties. Think about the things you have control over. Even write them down. There are a lot of things that we have control over. What we put in our body, the books we read, the people we associate with, the TV programs we watch, our habits, our effort, how much we exercise, all these things. There's numerous. Write those down and commit to yourself. I'm going to take radical responsibility over these things. I love that. And then the other thing that you said is, what you learned with the 5 of you growing up, Lisa, was that, Christmas and Thanksgiving were more, it wasn't like a big formal event. You'd lounge around in your sweatpants but you realized that you could bring people into your life that became family. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Family is not necessarily who you were born into. That's the choice of the universe. That's a luck of the draw, or sometimes the unluck of the draw. But we can build family and community with the friends we associate with, the people we bring into our world, and we can make our own grandpas and grandmas, aunts and uncles, cousins, and brothers and sisters by just who we associate with most and how much we love, understand, respect, and appreciate them. So those are some of the words of wisdom in the first 15 minutes. So your credentials are definitely caught up to everybody else's by. So, I know you've gone through so much transformation in the past few years, and so much internal and external transformation. During that process, Lisa, what would you say is the greatest learning you've had?
Yes, the last few years. So I'd have to say going into, because collectively we've all had a lot of change, right, with the pandemic, but going into that wasn't my best season. So I kind of went into that really just physically and emotionally and spiritually kind of drained before the pandemic hit. And I had picked up some kind of those old bad habits again. And I was just recently juggling being a single parent. I was working full time. I was studying for my securities licenses when things started shutting down. Again, I have to say I had them years ago, and I did take like a 5-year break with my youngest to be home with her. So I was going back into the workforce and studying. So it was a busy season for me. And I was, like many of us were, we were overcommitted. I was the yes person. I was overscheduled. I was just surviving. So one of the greatest lessons, and actually it was initially with the pandemic, it was kind of forced, right? We had to slow down. Everything stopped. And I think when it shut down, I learned to rest. And I don't mean like mindless Netflix watching, but just to do things that filled my soul. And I think that, leading up into that point, as a mom, I always felt like I was always giving, to others, but I wasn't taking care of myself. And so I really learned the importance of self-care and like doing those things that did fill me up. I don't know if you've heard the saying, but they say, you can't fill from, or pour from an empty cup, right? So I was in that place. I was just burning the wick at both ends and just tired. So I think that was one of the biggest things for me, was just to learn to slow down, learn to find out what it is that fills me up, and be intentional about doing those things. You know, I don't know if you pay attention, but when you travel or you fly with kids, you know, the flight attendant will come on and they'll say, like, you know, as they go through the checklist or the rundown, and, you know, here's your exits, and, you know, to the front, to the back, to the, you know, they also say, you know, in the event that the oxygen masks come down, you know, we are to put our masks on ourselves first before the children. And that's a visual for me that I think I had at that moment in time, was just like, you cannot show up well for others if you're not taking care of yourself. So that was a huge shift for me, I think, during that season. And that was, like I said, by slowing things down, allowed me to really focus on that, which was great. And I would say, you know, that looks different for different people. You know, it might be take a bath, take a hike, you know, call a friend, you know, but just making sure that you spend a few minutes for yourself each day. So that was a big one for me. I would, I learned, like you mentioned, the radical responsibility. That was really an intention to make a choice to, instead of continuing to be reactive to situations in my life, it was kind of learning how to shift from that survival mode, that victim mode, to just being proactive and just taking that radical responsibility to focus on where I'm going to put my energy, and, you know, just trying to be that best version of myself instead of being in that survival mode all the time. And so that was a big one for me, especially early in that pandemic, in the last few years. And then I really was sitting, you know, at that same time, just sitting down every day. I've been pretty good about, like, for me, that quiet time in the morning, starting my day out right. But I've gotten the habit of writing down 3 things a day that I'm grateful for, because gratitude's a choice, right? So we can choose to be grateful. And so, you know, sometimes that might be me just writing down, I'm thankful for my house or my girls or our health. And sometimes I'm grateful that I didn't lose my stuff on someone who I was frustrated with, you know, so it could look different. But I mean, but recognizing those wins and writing them down, I think, was a huge thing for me, and just shifting that perspective, because it was a hard time, you know, both, you know, going through everyone was going through in the world, and then also what I was just going through personally. So I was very intentional about that. And I also, being very intentional about who I spend my time with. I say to the kids, like, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, that's a phrase that I say to the kids. So I'm like, what am I going to allow coming into my life? Because that's probably what's going to overflow out of my heart, right? There's actually a verse in Matthew that's like, what overflows from the heart, the mouth speaks. So I had to choose, like, what am I going to allow into my life? And so I was very intentional about that this last few years as well. Just, you know, not bombarding myself with the news. You know, who am I, you know, talking to? Unfollowing certain people, you know, was very intentional about that as well. So I would say, like I said, that's in line with that, like, radical responsibility, right? Just, you know, being intentional about where my time and my energy was going. And I was very fortunate that, you know, a lot of, you know, people during this, like, last few years have probably put on 10 to 20 pounds in the pandemic. You know, we're all wearing leggings, but actually I did the reverse. I think I'd mentioned I had picked up a few bad habits that I had learned years back, but I picked up some of those bad habits again. And so I was reshifting that, going back to just eating what's right, doing what's right for my body and my mind, and ended up getting in a physically and emotionally and spiritually better place than I started. So that was great.
So all the things you said about, when I asked you the question, your biggest learning, the first thing you said was you decided to start taking, you know, you felt like you were giving so often when you were married to your former husband and your daughters. Mm-hmm. And then you decided to take radical responsibility, put your oxygen mask on first, self-care. Did it make you a better mother or a worse mother?
Oh, better, for sure. And I think for one, I want to model that well for my girls. I think we do live, where I was raised and such that, that is a selfish, thing to do, is take care of yourself. But I want to model that for my girls. But for sure, I think raised my patience, my energy, and just help me show up better for my friends, my family, and for myself. For sure.
The reason I ask that question is because I know, because of the texts and emails and all the messages I get from the heart letters and comments from the podcast, there are a lot of single parents that listen to the podcast. I don't know why, but I think because, when we're single parents, you tend to you struggle with certain issues. You struggle with different demands of life. And so a lot of people, and I know I was that way for a while years ago, where you feel like you have to drain everything from you to give it to your child. And you realize, as you said, you can't pour from an empty cup. And so I just love that wisdom. And I really want the Bamboo Pack audience, those of you, and whether you're single parent or not, it's irrelevant. If you want to provide value to your loved ones, to your customers, to your clients, to your company, to your friends, your family, to the community, to the world as a whole, you have to be able to pour from a full cup. And that does come from taking care of yourself physically, intellectually, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and financially, for that matter. So I think that's so good to know that, it's not selfishness. It is, in fact, selflessness when you take care of yourself because you want to do so you can provide a better, like you said, you want to model for your girls. We all want to model for our loved ones, and we can't do that if we're depleted. So I'm going to ask you, because you made this transformation, and I've watched it unfold on Facebook, and it's quite magical, really. Right now, a lot of people put on their quarantine 15 or so. I know a lot of people did during the COVID era, the quarantine era. And right now, so many people, especially at the beginning of the year, so many people are focused on health. Could you summarize? I know this is difficult to ask a professional, and I'm probably putting you on the spot, and I don't mean to, but could you share if you could give 3 to 5 tips, simple tips for somebody who's deciding, wants to get out there, wants to change their physical being, therefore to change their emotional, intellectual being and their spiritual being, but start with that physical. What would you say are some simple things they can start doing now?
That's a really good question. And I would say just start doing something, right? I think it's just, I'm a very all or nothing personality. That's how I'm wired. I'm like 110%, or 110 miles per hour or 0, right? So I come from that place. I know what it's like when you're like, well, I want to have everything perfect before I start. Or, I feel like if I get a little derailed, I'm like, oh, I just want to quit. That's just how I'm wired. But just to do one small thing a day, because creating the habit of something is what's going to be helping in the long run, because motivation only gets you so far, right? But by focusing on building one small habit at a time is really going to help you in the long term, but you have to start. So I think it's really good for people to, ask themselves, what does that goal, or what does, being healthy look like to that person, and visualize that, and asking yourself, for example, if you're going to the grocery store, what would the healthier version of you buy at the grocery store? Would it be the chips and the soda? Or if that healthier version of you wants to run a 5K, then maybe just start incorporating 15 minutes a day of a walk, and then build that up from there. If it's getting in a swimsuit for a vacation, have that vacation location on your phone, picture that you can see, but just start, visualizing where that person, where you want to be. As far as like just quick, easy things that you can do is just like starting to drink half your body weight in ounces of water. Again, small hello habit, always have a water cup with you, have it in your car, just, make that intentional decision, or let it be just limiting your sugars, just maybe cutting back on the drinks that you have during the week, or, getting a good night's sleep. That's a great one. How you end your day and start your day is really important. So I think, if you get a good night's sleep and you start your day off right, it's going to help and probably make good decisions throughout the day. I would also say, just whatever you do, don't do it alone. Share with people what your goals are. have an accountability buddy. It's like if we tell someone we're going to show up and meet them at the gym, we're more likely going to show up if we've told someone, right? If we don't tell anyone, if we don't go to the gym, no one knows, right? We're okay. But if we have that accountability buddy and we're like, oh, shoot, do I want to text them and tell them I'm not going? So just let it be, you tell someone, hey, I want to run a 5K, or hey, I want to, I'm not drinking anymore, or hey, I'm going to read 5 books, whatever that is, just tell someone so that you have a little bit of that accountability, because you don't have to do it alone, I would say too.
I think those, what you just said, and I'm going to capture this for the audience in just a minute. What I really liked what you said is start small. And I think that's a problem. I think so many people this time of year, they get the gym membership, they go on that strict diet. And I'm a lot like you, Lisa. I'm an all or nothing guy. And I've been that way all of my life. And it's really cost me a lot, because I tended to, years ago, I would tend to start something and then I'd quit it. And then I realized this whole idea of bamboo progress, plant the seed, water, and it's give it time, and pretty soon it starts to explode through the earth. And that helped me a lot. Where Dawson made a good point in the podcast we shot a few days ago when he said he had a friend who had watched Dawson go to the gym every day and watched Dawson transform his body. And this young man was skinnier than Dawson, much skinnier, and was kind of embarrassed to go to the gym. So Dawson would tell him, just put your shoes on and go to the gym. Don't even have to go in the gym. Just park your car. Tomorrow, go walk 10 steps. The next day, get in the gym. The next day, stay 5 minutes. And pretty soon the kid, over the course of time, I don't think it took him that long, but he just made little simple progress until he was going to the gym and actually working out on a consistent basis. But it is that idea of starting small, setting simple habits. So what Lisa said here for the Bamboo Pack audience is to start small. Do one small thing a day to create those habits, one at a time. It's 1% growth if you grow 1% every day at something, you'll be 38 times better at that, or stronger or healthier at the end of the year. 1% a day. The other thing she said was choose what healthy looks like to you and visualize that. You're going into the grocery store. Picture the person you want to become. Picture the person you're destined to become. That is your best version of yourself, and with your health. And decide, if I'm that person now, where do I go? Do I go to the fruits and vegetable aisle, or do I go to the chips and pop aisle? The next thing she said was drink half your body weight in water. Take ounces of water. Drink half your body weight in water ounces every day. Water is, it's the most pure thing you can put into your system. And it's so simple, and it's free. Unless you're buying Dasani, you're buying $4 bottles of water, but you don't have to. Buy a water filter and for $30 and drink your own water out of the tap every day. Lower your sugars, lower your alcohol, get sleep. What she said earlier about rest is so powerful. And that's one of the things that has been a misnomer in the business world and community for so many decades, is these people who burn the candle at both ends and I require 5 hours of sleep. Baloney. There's hardly anyone I know. In the top 1% of all performers in all industries are maniacally religious about getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. A genius that I have the opportunity to do some training with this year is Robin Sharma, who's written multiple books. He works with billionaires and athletes, and he shared the other day that the people he works with, that 1%, those top 1% performers in the world, they have a really strong mentality. When they work intensely. When they rest deeply. And he understands the body and the mind works at a really weird cycle. It needs rest, just like your muscles do. The other thing is, the way you start and stop your day is incredibly important. It really is. Getting up and smoking a cigarette and having a greasy breakfast and running out the door, or even getting up and just running out the door to work, that is not the right way to start the day. It is not. It's like on a cold day in the upper part of Michigan. You don't just get in your car and go. You start your car and let it warm up. You let the engine warm up. You let the fluids flow through. Your body and your mind need the same thing. So how you start the day and how you end the day are the two most important things that we can do to create good habits and create a better lifestyle. And then the last thing that the advice that I took out of this that I need to work on is don't do it alone. I'm not the guy who goes to the gym. I work out a lot, but it's hiking, running, walking, lifting weights, meditation, stretching, but I do it all in my own home. But the one good thing I have is I have Dawson, my son, who does the same thing. And we do communicate quite a bit. And the first thing we say when we wake up, what'd you do today? Well, I lifted today already. I did abs. And that helps a lot. So I guess I do have that, but share your intentions with other people. and commit to other people what you're going to do. It does. Peer-to-peer accountability is the most powerful accountability out there. So thank you for sharing that. I think that was really powerful, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I'm going to go to the toughest question I ask. And like I always tell all my guests, you can refuse to answer this, so that's up to you. But if you would answer it, the question is, what is the most difficult thing you feel you've ever gone through? And then how did you overcome it? How did you scale that brick wall?
I would say for me, there's not just like one event, or just one thing. I would say it's more of a chapter in my life or a season that I've kind of been through. And, I was a mama really young. I was in a difficult marriage and then going through divorce and middle of a pandemic, so it was a tough season for me. It really challenged me spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So I think for me, I would say I just not regretting this chapter in my life was actually really important to kind of work through how this has made me who I am today. That it's strengthened my faith. It's built my grit and resiliency. It's built confidence in myself. I really shifted. I kind of came from that place of like, things are happening, I got that victim role or that drama triangle, and you can get wrapped up into it, but just really pausing and just knowing that things are happening for me, not to me. And I think that also helped me kind of shift and look at challenging times as growth opportunities versus staying in that victim place or in that place of, poor me, So that was a big thing for me to then overcome. And then I would say I would start implementing the things I kind of mentioned earlier, taking that radical responsibility. But that was a big mental shift for me to get to that place.
To go back on that, I know a lot of people who go through a divorce or a separation or a breakup in a relationship, you tend to feel like you're a failure. And I guess there is a sense that you failed at something. There was a failure, but there was a failure in the process of the relationship or in the continuity of the relationship. There wasn't a failure in necessarily the person. And I think that's so incredibly powerful for anyone out there right now who's going through a difficulty. And maybe it wasn't a relationship breakup, but maybe you just lost your job, you got demoted, a health scare, maybe you got kicked out of someone's life, whether a friend or a family member. And to realize that life isn't happening to you. These things aren't happening to you. They're happening for you. And within every difficult cloud, there is a silver lining. And going from that, I love this idea. And you've said it a couple times, going from not considering yourself to be a victim of anything and taking radical I got to say that twice, radical responsibility during those times. And it's obviously showing, again, through the processes I've watched over the past few years on Facebook and social media. It's showing in just not just your physical being, but really in the positive things you put on Facebook, the menus you put on Facebook, and the food you cook on Facebook, and the dietary and the health, I should say, the healthy. I don't know. I'm not a cook, but menus or recipes and things like that you put on there. And it's paying off so much. So I think that's such a good kudos to you, because so many of us can learn from what you've gone through the past 3 or 4 years, Lisa, is when during the difficult times, we can either let it kick us or we can get back and swing back at it. And you got back up and swing back at it, and it's paying off big dividends, not just for you, but for your 2 amazing daughters as well. So I think that's great stuff, because we're all going through something right now. And how do we react to it? So now I know you're looking at some potential professional advancements here coming up and things of that nature. But right now, as you've gone through all of this transition, this transformation in life, and you're continuing to do so, I know you haven't stopped yet. You're going to continue on probably at a much even more exponential pace. What do you consider to be a win or a victory in your life?
I just love seeing other people win. So I would say it starts with my kids. I love seeing my kids win. It was actually cute. I was going through some paperwork of Taylor's, I think, when she was cleaning out her notebook or something, and I actually noticed a little journal entry that she had put in her notebook, and it just had a little Q, and then it says role model, ? And then why? And then she put her answer. She goes, one person that I look up to is my mom. And that's because my mom pushes me to be the best and is very adventurous, kind, funny, and active. And like, that's a win for me, right? Like I love that my daughter sees, that being kind, is important, and being adventurous, not, living in fear. And that I am pushing her a bit to do her best. Like you want people to push you a little bit, right? But loving them for where they're at. So that was a huge win for me as a mama, but I just love seeing my kids kind of work through hard situations. I love Taylor, she's 12, this is a tough age, but seeing her navigate friendships with empathy and compassion for others, but also, like I said, pushing through things that are, life's not always easy, right? So kind of watching her at this age work through that, that's a big win for me. Seeing my oldest daughter, she's, running a business and, navigating people. And so that's a big win. And then it never gets old when I get to help people kind of break chains and find freedom in their health, and just becoming better versions of themselves. So that's a big win for me as well. I was actually just chatting with a client yesterday. She was, down 7 pounds, and she was just super excited. You could just hear it in her, in her voice, that she's like, my inflammation's down and I'm waking up refreshed before my alarm. And that doesn't get old either. So those I would say are probably my biggest wins.
Those didn't surprise me at all. I knew you were going to share something about your 2 girls, and I knew you'd share something about a client, because that is a maniacal focus you have when it comes to you taking care of your self-care. Outside of that is your family and your clients. Now, question, how's your dad doing after the stroke?
He is doing really, really well. So we're very fortunate. His stroke was mild. So thankfully I think being as in tune with his body as he was, it happened in the middle of the day. So he was aware of what was going on. And from the point of when he started feeling symptoms to when he got the stroke medication probably was within an hour. So he was very fortunate, and it shows. His long-term prognosis is great. Oh,
what's his first name?
Ian.
Well, Ian, myself, my family, and the entire Bamboo Pack continue to cheer for you. Keep getting better. Keep getting better every single day. We're very glad you caught it in time and that you're on a strong road to recovery, and probably fully recovered by now. But we'll keep cheering for you anyway. All right, Lisa, you and I are going to jump in a time machine right now, and we're going to fly back to the moment. Not a moment. We're going to go back to 3-4 years ago. Right before COVID, life was different for you. And you're going to go back and talk to that younger version of yourself. You're going to sit on a park bench. I'm going to sit there and just observe. What do you say to that younger Lisa McBride? What recipes for success, or what life learnings or wisdom would you share with her that you know now that you weren't aware of at that point?
Such a good question, right? And actually, I think if you would have asked me this a few years ago, I probably would have been like, I would do it all different, right? I'm like, don't do this, do this. But now, after kind of working through some of my ways of thinking and my thought process, I would share a few probably tips with myself that would help me enjoy the journey a little bit more. I think that, as I was mentioning to you before, like, I feel like we are a product of, our choices, and we go through certain things in life for a reason. And I don't think it's for naught. I do feel that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with you today if it wasn't for what I'd gone through. So I think I would, in coming from that place, I would go back and just tell myself, like, you're enough, and have the courage to be you. Just to trust my gut. I think there's times in my life where I just haven't really had the confidence to trust my own abilities and to trust my own instincts. And that probably made things more complicated than they needed to be. So I would say that there is so much freedom and forgiveness Life's way too short to hang on to baggage. So just to kind of work through that, forgive people, have a lot of grace with people and yourself. And I think I would just, because I think being busy and burning, like I said, getting myself so tired, I would just be like, look, busyness is not a badge of honor. It's a choice. So life is full. Yes. But it's a choice. So, spend your life around what matters most. And your self-worth is not coming from what you do, but who you are.
Thank you. I'm going to recapture this. So, because this is the sweet spot of today's, one of the sweet spots of today's episode. So all of you out there, the Bamboo Pack, please listen to this. And I know some of you are going to fight this in your head. You might fight this in your heart, but you are enough. You are. You're going through struggles. Some of you, if you're not, you have, or you will. And all of us are going through something, but some of you are just right now, you're in a dark space. You're going down this spiral, the rabbit hole, and you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. You have a lot of self-doubt. Your confidence is low. You don't feel like things will ever change. You are enough. Have the courage to be you. Trust your gut and your own abilities. Take that radical responsibility that Lisa talked about several times today. What a beautiful, beautiful phrase, radical responsibility. I love it. There's freedom and forgiveness. So you might have a problem with someone else right now. You might be struggling with another individual, another group of people, or you might be struggling with yourself. Forgive them. It doesn't mean you have to associate with them or be friends or family with them, but forgive them. And forgive yourself. We're all human. We make mistakes. We're not divine. We're not some deity. We are simply human beings who have frailties and faults. Forgive yourself. And spend your life around things that matter to you. People, books, environments, cultures. Go places that make you happy, that mean something to you. That's your gut. Trust your gut. Don't listen to the outside influences, the critics, the cynics, the people who are trying to tell you which direction you should go. You follow your own gut. Follow your own path in this world. You'll find yourself, if you do these simple things, you'll find yourself climbing out of that rabbit hole. And then at that point, you can fully and truly love yourself. And when you do that, as Lisa said earlier, you'll be pouring from a full cup, and you'll be able to give that love to the people around you and to the community and to the world as a whole. That was really powerful stuff, Lisa. I'm still taking notes because I didn't get to finish my last sentence. So as we begin to wrap up with two more questions, Lisa, what is next for you?
I would say really kind of just focusing on the now. I am a planner by nature. So I just really want to enjoy the season that I'm in, being present, being available. I mentioned there's 11 years between my girls, and knowing that I have a 12-year-old, I've only got a few years left, right? Before she's like, and it goes so fast. So just really want to cherish this moment and enjoy this time being available. I think that in the rat race of life, I got to a place where I wasn't present. And that to me is very important right now. So, it's a juggle and it's a stretch, and I have to be intentional about it, but that's probably my biggest focus right now. As you mentioned, I am joining a great team. So I'm excited to implement some of the things that I've learned over the last few years in the workforce. I think communication, boundaries, all those things are great. And so I'm excited to apply those in the workforce. And personally, I would say working on being more comfortable being uncomfortable, like saying yes to the podcast. This is outside of my comfort zone, right? So doing things that are uncomfortable, because that's where the growth happens. So learning to be, I craved calm I craved comfort after the divorce. And that's what I wanted to be. So now I got myself there, but now kind of making that shift to, okay, let's get a little uncomfortable again. Let's do things that stretch you again. And so I'd say that personally is things that I'm, want to learn and grow in that area. But really, Mike said, my focus is the girls and just enjoying the moment, the now.
I think that what you just said, that one of the things there is doing things that make you uncomfortable. I think that's such a difficult thing it probably is the most important things we as human beings can do, is consistently doing things that make us uncomfortable. I have a client that for all of my clients this year, we started this process in November. I had everybody just sit down over the course of a month and a half and determine what their 12 big wins will be this year. And a win has to be something that's measurable, impactful, and something that they haven't done before. And one of them put down, he started with every day he was going to do something that scared him. We got it down to once a week. So I said, that's a big challenge to do something every day that scares you. I think we got it down to 52 things he's going to do this year that just scares the heck out of him. And I think when we can do that, because our comfort zone is, so this is something you're well aware of, Lisa, but for the Bamboo Pack audience, our comfort level probably has the strongest gravitational pull of anything in the universe. It just wants it wants job security. It wants to keep itself small and comfortable and safe. And there is no growth. There is no adventure. There is no true love. There's no living in your comfort zone. There's only slow death. And when we do things that make you uncomfortable, even though it scares and terrifies the hell out of you, it makes us become better people. When that comfort zone gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you become a much, much better, healthier, more grounded, stronger human being. And that's what we're all looking for. So I think that's extremely powerful. Lisa, I will include, if you don't mind, some of we'll talk after, any contact information that I can that you'd like me to share. I'll include that in the body of today's email, the text version of today's email, so people can get a hold of you, because I think you have so much to offer to the world out there that a lot of these Bamboo audience members are going to want to know, okay, how do I get a hold of Lisa McBride? So we'll talk about that afterwards. So Bamboo Pack members will include anything Lisa allows us to share. Please look for that in the text of today's email or today's podcast. One last question, Lisa, before we wrap up. And that is there any question that I didn't ask that you wish I would have or I should have? Or is it any final mantra or message you'd like to leave with the Bamboo Pack audience?
Let's see. I would say kind of what we were talking about earlier. Just do one thing. Pick one thing that you can work towards. I feel like if we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. So I do feel like, just taking one little step in the right direction each day, like you said, that 1% growth, or if it's that step closer to the gym, or if it's an uncomfortable phone call, or just have a goal, have something that you're working towards. And if it's, like I said, 5 minutes of self-care, or if it, whatever that is, just do something every day for yourself and to move yourself forward, I would say is the biggest thing I could just share, because it all adds up, over time.
It does. The incremental growth every day eventually becomes exponential growth. And there's an explosion at some point in our lives of that spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and mental growth that eventually happens, or financial growth. It happens if we start small and just build up every day. So I think that's a perfect way to cap off what your primary message, and take radical responsibility on those small steps every day. We can't forget that phrase, man. I love it. Radical responsibility. I may have heard it, but it's the way you phrased it. It made so much sense. All right. So it's funny, Lisa, because I'm thinking about the people from Oregon that I've had on the podcast. I think you are number 4 or 5 in the first 67 episodes. And I actually have another guest coming on Thursday who's from Bend, I think. And I had an episode with somebody from Boring, Oregon. And I've had 4 or 5 anyway, maybe 6 so far. So you're the first of 2 this year from the state of Oregon. So I must have a lot of connections out there. There's a lot of good people out there. So
there is.
I loved living. I lived out in Portland for 6 or 7 months in my 24 years ago or 23 years ago, 24 years ago. I lived right in Portland, and I met so many great people. And that's really how I got connected. That was kind of one of the first of multiple steps that got me connected to you when I was working with you and I believe Justin back in the day. So if it wasn't for those 6 months in Portland, Oregon, I wouldn't be here doing a podcast. And I certainly wouldn't have you on the podcast because I wouldn't even know you existed. So I'm glad I took those steps and lived out there for 6 months, because it landed on this spot today. So, Lisa, I just want to tell you, it's been an honor to talk to you. This was an amazing episode. I can tell when I'm in the middle of an interview how I think it's going to go and how the audience is going to absorb it or not. This is one that people are going to absorb. I think your story is great. I love your ideas of just when you're going through a difficult time, We can lie down and we can crash and burn, and we can step up like the phoenix rising out of the ashes, and we can transform our lives in a multitude of ways. And you've done that, and you continue to do that, and you continue to inspire others to do that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being such an amazing and inspiring guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you very much for asking me for beer. It was an honor.
We might have to do another one in a little bit here too. So don't think it's just one and done. There might be 2 episodes in this one. I'd like to talk to you.
I would definitely come back.
I think it'd be a great one, Lisa, to just talk about health ideas and health tips and go into that in more depth. So I think that'd be a great episode in the future, and I think people would really absorb that as well. So
absolutely.
All right, Bamboo Pack audience, thank you for tuning in again this week. Please, if you like what you heard, I know you will, please hit that like button, subscribe, share, rate us, review us, and please, by all means, share it with 3 people you love. Just share and say, hey, listen to this interview. There's so many pearls of wisdom, and I caught so many on this episode, probably more than 50% or 20 or 75% of my former episodes. And there's just a lot here that can really transform lives in so many different categories. So please share it. And in the meantime, please, if anyone out there has any questions that I'm not asking our guests, please email me, text me, get on our website or Facebook message or Instagram message, however you want to get a hold of me, and say, Brian, this is a question I wish you'd ask people. I'll definitely consider any questions you have out there. I just formulated these questions a few months ago and I stuck with them, and they seem to be working. But please, if you have any questions out there, let me know. I'd love to ask them to our guests. All right. Until we talk next time, Bamboo Pack members, please get out there and sculpt your life. What that means is get out there and give your best every day. Show love and respect to others and live consciously. By all means, live consciously. I appreciate you all.